No, it's good for me. Because it makes, you have to move the next year up, it's easy, it's already there.
All right, thank you very much. It's after the hour, 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Thursday, February 2nd Financial Planning Committee meeting to order. First order of business is the approval of minutes from last meeting. I've read them over and entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Next item of business is the 2024 preliminary capital budget. John, you want to walk us through that?
Yeah, so in your handout, there's a sheet, it's got a little red text up at the top of it. This is an attempt to sort of bring together all of the projects that we're hoping to move forward with in the upcoming year into one matrix that shows you not only the project, the cost, but a funding source as well. And this year is very unique because of the outstanding American Rescue Plan Act funding that is still to be determined by the Board of Selectmen. But let me just sort of walk you through what we have here. You're going to have the police and the fire projects discussed this evening. At your next meeting, you'll be hearing from DPW for his upcoming 2024 projects. You heard from him last week, an update on projects that are already been funded and a status report on those, and the school department as well. But just to kind of walk you through here, so just as a reminder, for fiscal '24 capital budget, we have a little over $1 million, $1,065,000 to do pay-as-you-go capital. That's on the lower end of what we've seen. You know, last year we had $2 million, and it has to do with, you know, the tighter budgets get, and the more we push our revenue estimates, you know, the end of the year surplus is going to be, you know, smaller. So what we're proposing for fiscal '24 in the police department, replacing 3 cruisers, which the chief will speak to in a few moments, at $190,500. Police station exterior repairs and painting at $70,000. Both those projects would be done with free cash. Then we have the fire department engine 1 replacement for $900,000. That project is being proposed to be funded with ARPA. We've got a few things that are labeled here to be determined. We've got a downtown master plan phase 1 that is ongoing, and the thought there is that there likely will be ARPA funds used to get that project going. It's not going to be ready for funding in time for town meeting. Then you've got the highway division projects. You've got roadway maintenance, a 20-ton dump truck, the highway garage tight tank, which is a DEP compliance project, and a 1-ton dump truck. Out of those, the DPW highway garage tight tank for $475,000 is one that's being proposed to be funded in that far right column by ARPA. And then under water and sewer, you've got a 15-ton dump truck, and then the SCADA Phase 2 matching grant allocation. You heard from the DPW director last week that we were successful in getting a $490,000 grant from the federal government to do the SCADA Phase 2, and that is the 125 is our matching, and that would come out of fund balance. And then under the schools, you have 2 projects. One that you've heard a lot about is the Proctor School flat roof replacement. That's $1.7 million. And the Z School back walkway entrance repairs. This is the concrete portion that we viewed in the facility walkthrough, Dave, if you remember, where it's spalling and it's a safety issue. And so Scott Charpentier reviewed those numbers, a little higher than I think the school department was estimating, but that's in there for $40,000. So in total, the total of these projects is $4,530,500. Now, again, out of free cash is a little over $1 million, and then there is the ARPA funding. So for under ARPA, the proposal all along has been to buy the engine for $900,000, the DPW tight tank compliance for $475,000, and then the Proctor School flat roof for $1.7 million. So, so out of that 4.53 million, a little over 3 million of that is being proposed right now to be funded with ARPA. And the reason why this discussion is so critical at this juncture is that these projects have to be done. They can't be postponed. So if the Board of Selectmen does not release the ARPA funding, then these projects will slide over into the category of bonding. And we'll bring these to town meeting for funding, and we will issue debt for those projects, because again, they can't be postponed. I do want to just touch base, although you're going to hear this in more detail when the school department comes in. Originally, we were proposing about $800,000 of ARPA funding to go towards the Proctor roof. That was when we were anticipating that the Massachusetts School Building Authority was going to partner with us at roughly 50% of the cost. As I mentioned at your last meeting, MSBA has postponed that project, that program for this year. They're funding some projects this year, but they postponed it for next year. And that's a direct result of the fact that we've seen supply chain issues, significant escalation because of those issues, as well as inflation. And so essentially, they have all these projects that they've already funded that are now underwater. There are insufficient funds for those. So these are projects they've already approved. So MSBA has walked away from this program for the next, for the next 24 months. We have no chance of getting any funding. And that means that the town is going to be left with going it on its own. We might have been able to delay it for a little bit by spending some significant money to kind of patch that roof up, but it's not going to wait 2 years. And we received communications from the school department. This is their top priority. So that roof is moving forward. It's either going to be funded on a pay-as-you-go basis with ARPA, or it's going to be financed with debt. So in terms of the free cash projects, this isn't complete either, because of those of you that look, you see the red note at the top. We've got $1,065,000. Right now, the projects that we have listed are $1,105,000. So we need to make a decision as to whether or not we pull back one of these projects, or we ask for, $40,000 roughly in additional ARPA funds to make this budget work. A lot of times when you look at these projects on an annual basis, it's nice when it works out, and it's not by accident. We know we're generally going to generate roughly $1 million to $1.5 million of free cash available for capital projects. So when we look out and we plan the 6-year capital plan, we try to stagger things out so that we have a pretty good chance of getting those projects to fit in that year. Of course, we seek grant funding and other funding mechanisms like the CPC and so forth, but we try to do that. This year is a particularly lean year, and so we're still trying to, we need to tweak that, but the intention is to bring these projects that are listed here forward for fiscal 2024 capital budget. So in other words, these are projects that would go to town meeting in April. Obviously, if they're funded with ARPA, that's a simple vote of the Board of Selectmen. Those projects do not need to go to town meeting. If not funded through ARPA, they'd be bonded, it'd be a 2/3 vote, and everything would shift over, and all of these projects would be individual warrant articles at town meeting. That was a lot of information. Really, I'm just going to show you a snapshot of the projects that are on deck for funding in one form or another for fiscal 2024. We're hopeful that a good chunk of these wouldn't need to be bonded and would be able to be paid with ARPA. So just one other thing, in addition to the projects that are being proposed immediately for ARPA funding, there are additional projects, and Scott Charpentier, the DPW director, will speak to these when he comes in next week. There are projects that during the pandemic got postponed, one of which you heard a little bit about last week, which are drainage projects and issues, Assabet Hill, but just drainage issues in general. So those were pushed off. So we've got drainage and we have sidewalk projects that aren't on deck for fiscal 2024, but they do appear in 2025. So those are things that would require some additional discussion about whether or not ARPA funds could or should be used for those projects as well. What we try to do here is the projects that are being funded in 2024 with free cash are the typical cruiser replacements, small to medium-sized projects and equipment replacements that are recurring on a regular basis. And then you have things like a roof, which is really a 20-year project. And those pop up every so often. Keeping in mind, too, the Z roof is another project that's coming in a couple of years, so we really need to move these projects out. As I mentioned last week, we have a bubble that's forming because we delayed some stuff during the pandemic. And then frankly, we've added a bunch of projects in particular, the Downtown Master Plan, the Complete Streets program. These have brought new projects in that are are stacking up in here as well. So if we can't clear that bit of a backlog, the real option for us, because you can't just not invest in your capital and your infrastructure, the option is going to be that you'd have to start issuing debt, which then would have tax implications. We've been very lucky and successful, I should say, is a better word. There's always a little bit of luck because you never know how you're going to finish out the year, and things like pandemic and state aid, you don't know. But we've been able since fiscal 2012. We haven't had the bond issue debt for any of these smaller capital projects. And so that's worked out really well for us. But with the pandemic and the temporary shrinking of revenues and the postponement, it's created a little bit of a bubble here. So that's what you're going to see when next week we'll give you the whole 6-year plan. Frankly, we're trying to work to spread some of those projects out. The other reason that you're going to hear this tonight from the two chiefs is the project escalation is difficult. Like some of the quotes that we're getting for this equipment, they're good. It's good for 60 days. And if you remember, in June we had proposed to purchase the engine, the fire engine. It was $800,000. That same engine now, 6 months later, now is $900,000 with approximately a 2-year wait. I don't want to steal the chief's thunder, but that 6-month delay is throughout these projects probably added another, $200,000 to $250,000 of escalation. So it's important that the projects that we can do, when we can do them, not to put them off. And again, it's very easy to postpone capital for a year or two, which is how we got through the pandemic. But you can't do that indefinitely because really you're just kicking the can and creating more expense down the road. So for now, these are the projects that we intend to be discussing in further detail with the committee. And tonight, we've got police and fire coming forward to talk about not just their fiscal 2024 projects, but in your packet, as we do every year, they will talk about briefly every project that they're contemplating for the next 6 years. And again, I know I said this last week, but it bears repeating for folks that sometimes tune in and then think, well, boy, they didn't spend a lot of time on these projects and it's several $1 million. That's because we talk about the project for 6 years before it gets funded. So you get to ask your questions, we get to refine the cost estimates, we get to see grant funding and other alternative funding sources. By the time it comes up for the current capital budget, in other words, going to town meeting, the next round of town meeting, we've talked about it for at least 5 years typically. So the projects that you have on here are projects that we've talked about for 4 or 5, at least 5 years before they come forward for funding tonight. So with that, through the chair, we can move forward with tonight's presentations.
Sure, John, just quickly before we have police chief up, for every $1 million we borrow, how much does that affect the average home's taxes?
Well,
Rule of thumb?
yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to that, but we did run some numbers. So the 4 projects, the engine, the 3 projects, the engine, the DPW tight tank, and the Proctor roof, together is $3,073,000. That on the average single-family tax bill would add about $70. Yeah, and again, it declines over time, and that's assuming a 10-year bond. So the equipment is 10 years. The roof you could bond longer if you wanted to, but again, historically, what we've tried to do is pay cash and bond things for the shortest duration we can, so we're constantly clearing the debt, and that allows us to maintain a reasonable debt position, and it clears out so you're able to move forward with projects. I've seen towns that, just because you can bond something for 20 years doesn't mean you want to. It's, again, it's a way of pushing the can down the road, but what happens is that debt stacks up, and pretty soon, a larger percentage of your operating budget is going to pay for debt service, and it crowds out other things. We've had the opposite effect, where that debt service has dropped off over the years because we haven't been financing these small projects. But yeah, you can anticipate about $70 if these projects here have to be bonded. And we can't, again, there's no pay-as-you-go for a $1.7 million project unless you're gonna use, we've got $4.5 million of ARPA funds that are sitting. They just need to be, they could be released with a simple vote of the board. Again, I anticipate they're gonna take that up at their next meeting.
Very good.
You guys all set? All right, let's see what the police department's gonna do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You wanna introduce your
I-
colleague?
I'm about to do that.
Okay. You're welcome to sit up here if you'd like.
I brought Lieutenant Brian Griffin with me, my number 2 in charge here of the department. And unsolicited on his part, this will be my last presentation to the board, so someone on the department needs to know what's going on for next year, so I figured I'd bring him along. For the starters, obviously, the annual drive for, no pun intended, cruisers. To set the stage for that, yesterday and today, we took delivery of our 2 newest hybrid Explorer cruisers. That money was approved at the 2021 town meeting for fiscal '22. As soon as town meeting approved them, they were ordered in June. They were delivered yesterday and today. Supply chain delivery issues, and those, we traded in 3 vehicles for those 2. One was a 2014 Ford Explorer with 132,000 miles on it that needed a engine manifold. The 2015 Ford Explorer Mark Cruiser with 136,000 miles, that was just basically kind of falling apart at the seams. And the 2017 Ford Expedition Supervisor's car, which had 125,000 miles on it. One of the other problems we had during the pandemic was a lot of the manufacturers stopped issuing the extended warranties on some of the vehicles, so some of the cars that we purchased at that time did not come with extended warranties. So and we're feeling that pinch now because we were short of my car back in the 2020 year due to the pandemic, and that increased mileage on some of the others. I have a $20,000 annual maintenance budget for my cruisers, and that is gone at this point in time for this fiscal year. Because, like I said, the vehicles that we just traded in, we try to keep them on the road, but it comes to a point where we have to take them off. So some of our other cruisers now that aren't scheduled to be replaced so soon are now feeling the pinch because they're being driven much more frequently. So that's what we've been dealing with as far as the delivery and delays. And this year, I've been told by the upfitters that we historically deal with, that in the dealerships that we purchase the cruisers from, to expect a 10% minimum increase in the base price of the vehicles. So everybody, as John had said, the increases in the estimates are just going insane. And that also includes some of the equipment that we use to upfit the cruisers. Inside, when you change model years, again, with the new hybrid cruisers and the new Ford Explorers, they're 11 inches wider than the previous Explorers, and they're slightly longer, which means that the cage divider that separates the back seat and the prisoner compartment doesn't fit. That's $2,200. So there's always a consequence to model year changes. So we had to deal with that this year. In addition, one bright spot is that through the Green Communities Act, there is a $5,000 hybrid incentive that we can apply for. It's not a guarantee, but we're gonna pursue that. So that could be upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 that we could see back towards, it goes towards the cost of upfitting the cruisers, so we could see a slight reduction. And so this year, it's on our regular scheduled replacement, it's for 3 vehicles. And basically, my cost estimate for that is I took the 2 most recent vehicles that we had, the 2 new Ford hybrids. The total cost for those and the upfitting, which means taking all the old stuff out of the equipment and specialized equipment from the previous cruisers, mounting it in the new cars. We do that for a couple of rotations because that equipment needs to be replaced as well, so some years are more expensive than others. And basically added 10%, which I think is probably going to be a low estimate, but, so that came up with $61,700 per cruiser, so I rounded that up to 63.
63.
And it was up to, that brings it up to 190,000. And that's where we stand with cruisers.
If I may, through the chair, chime in, if you look at the second page in the handout, this is the cruiser replacement schedule. So if you're looking back, we've had a couple of years with 3 cruisers, and that's because during the pandemic, we postponed purchasing one of them. And so that's why we're looking at 3 cruisers again in this year. But the good news is, if you look at the schedule, we're back to that best practices schedule. 3 cruisers, 3 vehicles in 2024, 2 in 25, 3 in 2026, 2 in 2027, 3, so 3-2, 3-2, 3-2. And it's tough, because when you postpone capital, when you have a really good plan, you really want to stick with it. And when you have to divert from that plan, like we did during the pandemic, it messes things up for 2 or 3 years until you could get back on that schedule. With the request for 2024, gets us back on that best practices schedule, so. But you can see the replacement schedule that the chief has laid out.
Chief,
Yes.
any questions, please? Your cruisers, are they in service on the road 24 hours a day with
No,
your?
The reason we have the amount of cruisers, the number of cruisers that we have right now allows us to keep them at least off the road 1 shift.
Okay, 2 shifts.
So they work, depending on the schedule, who's scheduled to work and vacation and leave, we anticipate them to be no more than 16 hours a day on the road.
Okay. And someone mentioned at this past town meeting, you know, are we considering EVs? And I recall your comment was they're not yet ready, given the demands on the vehicle and the equipment in them. Any further update on that?
Actually, I can't give you an update on it. I can agree that like maybe for some detective vehicles or administrative vehicles, that's an option.
And not as demanding?
But as far as for the patrol vehicles goes, there are times when our cars stay on the road for almost 24 hours. Winter snowstorms, trees down, roads closed. We bring people to the cruiser from the station and swap people out. One of the residents at town meeting had mentioned the town of Topsfield going to all electric cruisers. I can assure you that I have spoken a couple of times with Chief Hovey. They bought one, and he hopes he never buys another. Within the first year of that vehicle, they had to keep it in the garage in the wintertime because the minute they pulled it out into the cold temperatures, they lost the battery charge dropped by 50%. And they have one, so their fleet does not consist of all electric vehicles. It's actually, Chief Parente and I just participated in a webinar that was put on by the state, and it was about the future of electric vehicles and fleets, and I won't speak for the chief, but I hope he chimes kind of in on it. But basically, the message we got was that the infrastructure is absolutely not ready for what the goals the legislature has set for electric vehicles. And there was basically no talk of emergency service vehicles being electric. They're talking about privately owned vehicles. So that was one of the things that I took out of that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
But again, a reasonable compromise is to look at hybrid, which is what,
Yes.
the chief is
Well, I
doing.
said at the town meeting, we'd be
Yes.
moving forward to that, so.
You did,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So we, like I said, we took delivery of 2 yesterday and today that we ordered over, well, almost 2 years ago. So again, these vehicles, I mean, I'll order them shortly after town meeting. All I need is a letter of authorization, but the purchase order don't get cut until actually the beginning of the actual fiscal year.
And I
But don't
heard,
anticipate
I
seeing those
heard over a year
until
ago, I don't know if it's Ford or the major manufacturers, that they're getting away from sedans. So you're anticipating in the future that you're gonna go to an SUV vehicle structure as opposed to a sedan?
Yeah, it's not so, there are three major police vehicle manufacturers, Dodge, Chevy, and Ford. And they have all started going towards the SUV. As a matter of fact, this model year, 23, is the last year that Dodge is gonna be in the police
Sedans.
market at all for the Durango or the Dodge Charger. So that's gonna leave Chevy and Ford. Ford does still offer a four-door sedan. It's basically a glorified Taurus.
Yeah.
And the Expedition. And they've basically priced themselves out of the market for
Yeah.
us because they start at like 54,000 on the contracts. Where the Dodge Chargers that we purchased were $34,000. The Ford Explorers on the state bids, they're up at now about 43,000 in the past bid. And the Tahoes that we bought a couple of years ago, they were $39,000. They've gone upwards of like 60, so it's going to be basically, there is a Ford F-150 patrol vehicle right now that's about 35,000, 36,000 on the state contract. But it's, the
Choices
only
are
game in town for
narrowing.
SUV right now is pretty much the Ford
Yep.
Explorer.
Thank you.
Moving on. The emergency replacement for the generator, had some preliminary conversations.
Excuse
I-
me, Chief,
yep.
skip the painting.
Oh, did I-
Skip over the painting?
Yeah.
I think
that was next.
Oh, you know. Oh, you know what? Where is it? If you've driven by the police station, you're gonna realize that it's in pretty pathetic shape. Unfortunately, due to a set of circumstances that were pretty much beyond our control, it's gotten to the point where it's really almost an embarrassment. This was on the plan back in 2019 to have the Sheriff's Department Works Release Program do it. They did it back in around, I want to say 2010 or 12, in that timeframe.
About 10 years ago.
Yeah, and basically it was done for the cost of paint materials. We had to rent a lift so they could do the exterior of the building. And I think the entire project cost about $5,000. Since the pandemic and up until present day, I just, again, as recently as today, they are not in operation because they don't want anybody from the population going out, contracting COVID, and bring it into the very cloistered, I guess you could say, environment where it spreads quickly. So that's not an option for us, and that's what we had been hoping for almost, over 3 years ago now. And, you know, we did pitch it, it was gonna be presented last year as capital, but it was decided that it wasn't the appropriate time financially. So here it is again, and I'm certainly hopeful that gets support because this is it's a 10,000 square foot wood frame, 2-story home. Because it was really not built as a police station, it's more of an office building or home. It's clapboard, and it has a lot of rot on the trim boards, so that's gotta be replaced. So this cost includes more than just paint. But the reason it's at where it is because of the prevailing wage law.
Yeah, I have to chime in on this one if I may. So imagine you have, I mean, we have houses this size in town. I can assure you they don't pay $70,000 to get them painted, even with some wood replacement. We tried to get Assabet Valley students as well. Unfortunately, due to the 3-story height, they're not allowed to work on it. So we can't work with them, otherwise they'd be great partners. But the sheriff's program was the best deal in town. It's not available. We've waited. We were hoping by now that they would be able to come back. But just so folks are aware at home that may be watching, we have to pay what are called prevailing wages, and essentially the state dictates what those are. And I can assure you, despite what some folks would say, that it is really the wage that's out there, A few years back, we went through the exercise of getting quotes as just a regular business or as you would as a homeowner, and then getting the quote as prevailing wage. And I can assure you, it's at least a 30% or more difference. In fact, some of the vendors that we spoke to, when we originally, the last time we went out to get painted, to get this building painted, we were trying to get some local vendors to do the work. And they said to us on the side, we're not going to do that because I can't pay my people $50 an hour on your project and then expect them to work for $20 an hour on the next project. And not only that, but the paperwork and the compliance that's required to track all of the payroll, and it's an administrative burden for them. But that's why these projects cost so much. And the worst thing for the town is on a very large project, that's one thing, but it's what we find is the smaller projects. You wind up with bigger companies who have the people who they have somebody assigned who just make they do the legal compliance and the payroll audits and all that. That's all they do. But as a municipality, we pay a premium for those smaller projects. And so ironically, you wind up shutting out the local contractor. We actually have a local contractor in town that would like to do this project for us at a very huge cost savings. And we told them we really appreciate that, but you legally can't. So we are, just so you do know, we are pitching through the Mass Municipal Association. We actually pitched in Northborough special legislation that would exempt projects under $100,000 from the prevailing wage law. We'll follow public bids and quotes and all of that. It's not like we're just going to pick who does the project. But just to exempt those smaller projects from this artificially high wage, and the legislature did want to take that up.
You've asked for this for years, though, too, right? I mean, this is not the first it's been on your priority list.
It is,
for years
as a procurement official, it's very frustrating for me when I know we're paying such a high premium for these smaller projects. I've asked the Mass Municipal Association this last cycle to actually make a proposal to our special legislation for Northborough to pitch it as a mass general law to change it with exemption. But as you can imagine, there's some significant special interests that don't want to see that change, so. But people look at this and they think we don't know how to bid stuff or we don't know how to run a project. It's like, well, come to my world for one day and you'll see the compliance issues that we have to deal with. And that's why the prices are what they are.
Okay, next we're moving forward, it's the generator. Again, it's original to the building. It's got quite a few hours on it. We started to come into repairs a couple of years ago. We had to repair the radiator, it was leaking. Just within the last 2 months, we had to replace the block heater. It's in an unheated room in the station in the basement because it's got the large air intake louvers on the wall. So it's constantly got a block heater running so that it will start when the power goes out. The switching equipment for it is, again, it's 34 years old and it wasn't state-of-the-art. Basically, when it was put in, it was probably been on a shelf for 5 years somewhere in a warehouse before they put it in. That has been recommended to us before by the insurance company that that switching be updated. But I'm gonna jump a little bit ahead here and say that I've increased the price a little bit, but I've talked with Sean Thompson, Facilities Maintenance Manager, to start looking for some requests for proposals or actually get some narrowed down costs. Difference in this is when this generator was installed, it was inside the building. Building code has changed. It now has to be outside the building, which adds to the construction costs. You're gonna have to run power lines under a driveway or something. So that's moving forward. And I have also included further on, out to 2029, a feasibility study for an addition and a renovation to the existing building. So I want to spec a generator that's capable of handling an addition as well. So I'll speak to that in a moment. So,
Chief, excuse me. Do you
Yes.
expect that transfer switch to be in this 90,000?
pardon me?
Do you expect the transfer switch to be in the 90,000?
I'm not absolutely sure. I can't answer that specifically. That's why I said we need to start talking with them. I know when it was suggested a while back to replace the the transfer switch. It doesn't look like the homeowner transfer switch. It's a major box.
I understand. I've seen them.
It's quite a cabinet or chassis.
Yep.
And it's very mechanical as compared to the new ones. It's got springs and levers, and it's very mechanical. So I don't know, I know it was like gonna be $10,000, and they were talking about replacing it, and that was probably 15 years ago. But that was for a similar type cabinet, not the more up-to-date modern ones. So I'm hoping maybe technology has lowered the price, I don't know. So,
A couple of points, if I may. One, what we're talking about going forward for town meeting are the 3 cruisers and the painting of the buildings. As I said at the beginning, the chief is now talking about and going through all the projects that they intend to do for the next 5 years. With regard to the generator, I do want folks not to be overly concerned in that it is an older generator. Several years back, one of the things that we did, belts and suspenders, as part of hardening our facilities, and you folks know because you recommended and approved this, is we wired the building, we bought a portable generator, a heavy-duty portable generator that we can move. So if this one were to go down in a power outage, the wiring is all set. Literally, DPW comes across the street with this thing, they plug it in, and they're up and running. We wired the fire station as well and a couple of critical facilities. So we do have the belts and suspenders. So.
That's our fiscal 25. Again, another fiscal 25 project. These have been in the queue for at least 4 years by this point. It's more of a furniture and the consoles that the dispatchers actually sit at. As you can see from the picture, I have referred to them in the past as 1960s, 70s vintage NASA launch control consoles. They are not very ergonomic or comfortable to sit at. They're not adjustable in the least. And they no longer fit the more modern digital equipment that we have. They were built for like analog radios that were mounted inside the consoles and the chassis, where everything we do now is completely digital and computerized, and it's kind of a mess. The dispatch is looking at between 6 and 7 computer screens, where we can have those actually nicely situated on a 6-screen rack and adjustable desktops, because we have people ranging in height in dispatch from like 6'2" to 5'2". So they can actually lower and raise them, and they don't have to crunch their knees or stand on their tippy toes to get to certain things. Again, that's a cost estimate. That would also include a raised floor, such as you'd find in like a computer room for the ease of running wires and stuff. You gotta keep in mind that this building now is 34 years old, and it has been upgraded multiple times for technology, and there are more wires running through walls and attic spaces and crawl spaces than, that's gonna be probably the largest cost of this project, is having our radio company and our computer services companies find out which wires go where, because all this equipment's gonna have to be moved. It's also have to involve state 911, because we can't touch anything in there if it's gonna move a piece of state 911 equipment. They have to have their technicians and engineers there, so it's gonna be a complicated project. A simple one, yet it's gonna entail a lot of moving parts, so,
Chief,
yes.
Anything, will this, if going forward, the project, the last one, feasibility, a new station, would this be this wouldn't be wasted money that 6, 7, 8 years, we're just tearing it all out and tossing it, would we?
It may be relocated to a different part of the building, but the equipment itself would be the same.
Yeah, the cost of the wires, but the equipment, you would be able to repurpose, and it's not
Absolutely.
like one of these maybe, cross our fingers and
Yes.
make do for the next few years, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Moving on to fiscal 26, again, this is all part of our interoperability project. It's going to multi-band portable radios. They're expensive, but it makes life easier for us. Our neighboring communities that we deal with on a regular basis, day to day actually, such as Westboro, they're on a UHF frequency. Shrewsbury used to be on a VHF, which is what we're on, so we can talk to them directly. They're now on an 800 megahertz system, which is very high-tech, computerized, and $1 million system that we can't talk to them on. Well, I shouldn't say that. The cruisers can, cruiser to cruiser, because we have 800 megahertz radios in those. And we have neighbors like to the west, we have like Boylston, they're low band. So we keep 4 radios in the cruisers, so we can talk to each commuter around us. And with this portable, you could basically almost eliminate the radios and the cruisers because it would talk to all the communities around us and our dispatcher. But it still has limitations. That's a technical, it's a pipe dream, I guess you could say. We'd have to have repeaters and different things to talk on every channel. But we would be able to talk on LPS 7, which is basically countywide, and we can be assigned to different channels. We can be statewide through MEMO and state police on their 800 frequency. So it basically coincides with like Homeland Security's interoperability plans in the state so that we can all be on the same page with communications. The fire department has them currently. I know they were fortunate enough to be the recipient of a grant some years ago. So that just makes life easy to work with our neighbors. And again, the feasibility study. I can tell you, I picked a date, and I heard some talk about, town hall studies and school studies, and I'm looking, well, I'm gonna go up for 29, so. And the only other reason I picked that is because the building will be over 40 years old at that point in time. And it's, I can tell you that at this point in time, it's too small. We have more employees than we have lockers and locker rooms. The place was never built for a female locker room. We have a female police officer and 5 female dispatchers. Our training room has now been turned into quasi office space. The only group now that uses it because of their size is moderate is the Trails Committee, and that time is waning. So the location, I like, and we've got, I believe, sufficient space off to the west side of the building, on the Chet side, to put an addition off to the left and to the right, if that's feasible, and basically a renovation of the building. I don't think we need to build a brand-new police station. I think an expansion with a renovation of what we have, with some modest future growth in personnel in 10 to 20 years, this building could last for quite a long time. But I would say that any future additions need to be brick and mortar instead of wood, that wood frame. But I envision the operational part of the dispatch, booking rooms in a newer section made, which is a little bit more security in mind in the original building, just turned into records, administrative space, offices, and that sort of stuff. But again, that's in there for feasibility study. I threw a number of $100,000 in there. I'm sure it's going to be more than that, but moving forward.
But see, this is a good example of asking departments to be thinking forward like this. And so he brought it forward, I dropped it in, just conceptually, it makes sense, but that's not getting funded this year. We'll have 5 years to refine and determine exactly what the scope of that is. But without thinking ahead like that and giving that time to again, refine the project and the cost estimates and the scope of what you want to do. But for planning purposes, again, this is, 6 years out, but each year you're going to hear more about it and get more information.
I also want to make it easier for the next guy who takes the big seat up there so that they don't have to put it in for it, so. But that's basically it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Great job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Next item of business, let's see what the fire department's doing.
I think you maybe should make the lieutenant talk and just,
Took good notes. Gave him my paper.
No, I grabbed my stack instead of one.
I'm here with myself.
Is that your sort of plug for your deputy chief
I
position?
would never do such a thing.
Never.
Never. I apologize for looking like I got in a fight. I had some oral surgery this week, and I walked into work today, and the guy said, "What the heck happened to you?" I said, "Well, I said something to John for more money, and he just..."
We had a full contact budget meeting earlier today, so.
So that's what happened. So thank you for giving me some time to speak to you tonight. The capital plan is always an important part of the fire service because the equipment that we deal with is so expensive. When I first started in the fire service just a couple years ago, you could buy a fire truck for $200,000 to $300,000, right? Now we're spending $900,000 on fire trucks, and it just amazes me. And that's only partially equipped. We do the same thing that the chief does. We try to reuse as much equipment as we can, but some things you can't. And a great example is, as he was talking about the radios. So our old trucks all have old mobile radios. So as the new trucks come in, we put new mobile radios in. And they are not inexpensive either. The best example I can give you is we just put our new pickup truck, which if you've seen it running around town, just to upfit that truck. That doesn't mean buying the truck, just to upfit it. Radios, lights, striping, cap, slide tray, is about $10,000. It's just crazy. And it's hard to keep up with the increases. So this year, in 2024, we're looking at replacing engine 1. Now, fire engines, our goal is 20 years in service. Now, that doesn't mean 20 years first due, that's 20 years in service. Normally, 10 years first due, 10 years backup, roughly, depending on how busy we are and how much abuse they're getting. One of the things you'll notice, if you look closely at our plan, is the age of the rescue is actually 1 year older than the engine. But we had some issues come up a couple of years ago at our annual service test with the engine, and our pump mechanic said, look, it's there, I can't do anything else with it. I can't tighten the packings anymore, there's no other adjustments to make. So as long as it keeps passing, you're okay. And as long as every time you use it, your mechanic, because I have my own guy, goes in and drains the pan and makes sure there's no water and does, all the stuff you got, it'll be okay. So that's where, I said, well, maybe now we should flip. It's only a year off, let's flip and let's move the engine ahead. My original, as John mentioned, my original proposal was $800,000. I've been here for 7 years now, so it's been in the plan for almost all the time I've been here. And I just spoke with Chief from Westboro. He bought an engine. 7-8 months later, bought the same exact engine. So there was no engineering, there was no extra, nothing. It was the same truck, just built the same truck, and it went up about $100,000. And what we used to be able to get in a year is now taking 2 years. So it's important to understand, I'm coming to you to replace this truck now. By the time we replace it, it's actually be 22 years old, right? Because it's taking that long to get them in. But I think if we do really good maintenance, we stay on top of them. My mechanics on it, we bring people in to do all the services all the time. So we're really on top of them. And I think if we stay on top of this and we can get this, it'd be great. I think ARPA is the way to go with that because of the cost. And one of the other big things with fire engines is if you pay cash, they're really happy with that. And they give you discounts on them lots of times. So that's always something to consider as well when you're purchasing. That is all there is for fiscal year '24, yes.
John, if we were to order that fire engine, what's the cash flow issue? How much down, how much of delivery, how does that typically work? Any perspective on that?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that too.
It truly depends on what company you're working with.
Okay.
Okay, so we've been, and because we do the competitive bid process, we don't always know who we're gonna end up working with. We say, this is the truck we want, and right now we've been dealing with mostly emergency ones is what we have, and we've purchased those through Greenwood Emergency Equipment, which is down in Attleboro. And we've had a working relationship with them for years. So we can normally purchase something with them, and they don't say, we want cash down now. It's cash, it's a certain amount on delivery, and then, excuse me, and then we pay our bonds, because that would be bonded, and we'd have to pay it then. Some other companies wouldn't even put it on the assembly line until you gave them a down payment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it truly depends on the company that we went up with, and where we are with. There's Pierce, there's E1, there's KME, there's a lot of different companies out there. And we try to really look closely at every bid we get to get the best deal for the town. Not just buy the prettiest, shiniest truck, we want something that's actually gonna do what we want it to do and be cost effective. And you people who've been on the board know that I turn back money if I don't spend it. So I'm hoping that that's the case with this truck as well, that we don't expend it all. But God forbid I don't ask for the money and then I end up short.
I just want to emphasize, when Chief Parenti came on board, you had already approved a significant amount for an ambulance replacement. And he actually went out, spec'd out, and determined something that was significantly cheaper. I can't remember the dollar figure, but it was, tens of thousands of dollars coming back. You guys have, we have really great department heads because they have trust in this plan that they reasonably have an expectation of getting what they need roughly when they need it, and they're willing to trade off a year or two, but it's not just a wish list. Because of that, they'll be honest with you, and they will turn that money back. One of the things that is great about using either ARPA or available funds like free cash is we're actually able to, as soon as town meeting is over, we're able to order, because that funding, we use wording that makes that funding available immediately. And it doesn't sound like much, but from April to July, we can get in the queue ahead of most of the other communities that can't put that order in until July. And that gets you at the top of the line, and it can make, especially given the circumstances with supply chain issues and delays, it can make a 6 months difference in when you get your piece of equipment or apparatus, so. But again, this, we would have liked to have been in that position, in the summer, ordered it for 800,000, 6 months later now, it's 900,000 and a 2-year delay. So when we propose these things, there's a rationale for why there's a benefit to doing what the staff is proposing. But be that as may, this is where we are now. This, particularly now, you're looking at a 2-year, this apparatus cannot wait. It will go to town meeting for consideration this year. And if we have to issue debt for it, then we will.
Is it
But it's
possible,
costing the town more money because of this delay. It's the time value of money
Yes,
in a rising interest rate environment.
yes.
it's also possible the Board of Selectmen vote on this and you can order it long beforehand.
If they vote,
Just in
on
case
it,
that were to happen, you can
If
actually
they
get
vote on it on a
quicker and
Monday
jump the line
night-
in front of a ton of people.
I'm sure the chief has got the specs, pretty much ready to roll, and it can move forward.
That might be a good idea.
Yeah, I have a captain who has been chomping at the bit, Captain McManus, and he's doing a great job getting ready, but the problem is, things change so much, right? So, say if we spec an Allison transmission, we go to purchase it, and Allisons aren't available anymore. So, no, okay, hang on, so we gotta change that, and what else changes once you get into that? The engineers, it gets crazy. I used to do that, I don't do that anymore, that's why I have guys that,
Chief,
so, yes.
Chief, just one more quick question. If that pump was to fail and we could not pump water with that, do we lose any insurance accreditation or any?
So there's several things that happen. So where we sit right now with the insurance service, the ISO, is we have what we need to have our rating of 3.3Y, which is a really good rating. It's a very good rating. It's not a 1 or a 2, but it's a very good rating at 3.3Y. If we were to lose a pump and ISO were to come in and do a spot, we want to recertify you, our numbers would drop. Those numbers are what the insurance companies utilize to set your fire insurance ratings for both commercial and residential. So yes, it does have an effect.
John, does that roll up to our bond rating?
No, not our bond rating so much as it's just insurance.
Insurance rates?
Yeah, insurance rates that homeowners, businesses, and indirectly the town for our facilities would pay.
Thank you.
So I did get quotes, again, due diligence, of what it would cost to fix engine one. Right, and it just so happens, our pump mechanic and I worked on the same shift for about 15, 20 years up in New Hampshire. He was my partner. And I used to work with him doing, his father had his own pump business. So he actually called me this morning. He says, hey, what's the status with that, with engine one? He says, I said, well, I don't know, I'm going tonight to find out. He goes, well, prices are going up. So if worse comes to worse and we can't get something, we'd have to rebuild. If we were to repair what's there, we're probably talking $20,000 to $30,000, depending on what has to happen. If they have to drop the pump and replace the pump, you're talking $80,000, right? And why would you put that much money into a truck that's 20 plus years old? I don't like putting $15,000 in a truck that's 20 plus years old.
I think the issue, the slippery slope, and I'm guilty of this in my personal life, is because I buy a car and I drive it for 10 years, and then it's like, oh, it needs a little something. That's right, Mike, I'm cheap. No, I'm frugal.
Thrifty.
But there comes a point where, you're putting $500 in, and then next week you're putting another $1,000 in. There's no guarantee because the overall system is at the end of its useful life. And this overall vehicle, a 20-year useful life, it's at the end of it. And you may be spending $25,000, $30,000, or $80,000. You fix this, you turn around, you could be dropping another 20, 35, 50. But not only that, it's not just the expense, but these are emergency vehicles. They need to run when they're needed to run, and they need to be reliable. You don't break down on your way to a fire. That's really bad. So,
Yeah, worse than to get in a truck and have it, and I've had it happen, and have it not start, or have the brakes not release. That is the worst feeling in the world, because you're like, we gotta get there, right? So if that happened with our primary pump now, engine one is our backup pump. So that's where we'd be going to.
Chief, approximately how often does this roll?
Engine one?
Yeah.
So engine one doesn't roll as much as engine two, but the idea is engine two would go away. Engine two would go backwards to our backup, and we'd have a brand new truck, because engine two.
Is this rolling 25% of the time, 20%, 50%?
Oh, probably 15% of the time, 20% of the time, but it's our main backup pump. And that's really the big concern. If we lose our main pump, that truck slides right up into its spot.
Thank you.
And I just want to, I know that this truck was talked about, the engine was talked about a lot in spending money, a lot, and I agree, with John. There comes a point when you're going to need this machine, period, end of story, and to spend needless money that we could use to repair a sidewalk and see which has to be replaced, it makes no sense at all from a financial point of view to go spend $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 to replace something. It's not as though you can patch it and keep it going for another 4 or 5 years.
No,
So it makes
we'll
no
be putting
sense.
more, the body's gonna start to rust out. And we're gonna have to do the brakes, we'll have to do tires, and tires, everything on a fire truck, just so you guys know, once you paint it red and put fire on the side of it, prices go through the roof. It's insane. And, I'm running into that right now with our bigger ambulances, the ones that are still green, that they bought because they were big trucks and they would be better. Yeah, they're not. I just put $10,000 into one for some suspension work and stuff. But ambulance, I have to have. I do 70% EMS. Those things are running. I called John, was it about a month ago? I said, just so you know, we're down to one ambulance. He goes, what? Down to one ambulance, and because I had 2 that were out of service. What are you doing? I said, I'm beating on people to get it fixed, which they finally did, but it's scary. We're busy. So that's it for fiscal year '24. Any more questions on the union? Fiscal year '25, I'm going to speak to one thing. First thing I'm going to speak to is the rescue. So the rescue you see is in there is for $970,000. The rescue is more of a specialized piece of equipment. That is the one that carries all of our airbags, all of our Hurst tools, all of our jacks, all of those types of equipment. And right now, what they basically have is an engine that was converted over to a rescue. What we're looking at with this $970 spec is a rescue that can function as an engine. So it's a slightly, it'll still have a pump, it'll still have a tank, it'll do everything it needs to do to meet the ISO qualifications, the Insurance Service Organization, but it'll give us more room to store more rescue equipment. So when we have those extrications, when we have those rescues that we need the equipment, we can have it on scene. Right now, it's kind of spread out amongst different trucks.
Will that shorten the useful life of the vehicle because it can be used more?
No, it'll be, so like right now, when I roll to an accident, we have to roll we take the ambulance, we take a rescue, and sometimes we have to take the engine, depending on what's going on. In this case, we would take the rescue, and we take the ambulance, right? So it would lessen more abuse on one of the other trucks. We try to take the smallest truck as possible to the calls. So you see Squad 4, the little truck that's out there, looks like the old Rescue 51, for those of us that have been around. Okay, that truck is the busiest truck in the station, because we send that to as many calls as we can, because the wear and tear on that versus the wear and tear on a $900,000 truck, it just makes sense, right? So that's the one that does most of the calls. The rescue is more of a specialized piece of equipment, but it would do any kind of a rescue. It would also be able to do all, it does most CO calls right now, but it would have hazardous material response capabilities and all that. So that's how that truck's set up. The other thing for fiscal '25.
yeah, if I could take this one. This is the, yeah.
I'll talk about it, it doesn't bother me.
I'm not gonna look at him at the moment, but, so this is the fire station building project. So as you know, because I do send you guys emails updating you on the status. So the long delay was, we purchased 6165 West Main Street, which is the old Pierce gas station in the dead center. Now, the upside is, that was literally the only place that a central station could go. Otherwise, you'd be looking at multiple stations to cover the town. So in the long run, very much cost effective. We structured a very good purchase and sale that required the seller to demo all the buildings and do all remediation. He had several pieces of paper that said the site was completely clean. We did not trust in that. So the long and short of it was, there was significant contamination still on that site. So the buildings were removed. On his dime, all that remediation was done. We did have to wait this a little bit longer because they wanted to do 2 cycles of testing of the groundwater. And so that was completed late summer, and the town ultimately closed on that property in September. Now, we also had an option on 10 Monroe Street, which is, if you're facing the parcel from the street, it's directly behind the Vidya Bank. And so that person, we had gone through a whole bid, but that was on hold because you don't need that little parcel if the main parcel wasn't going to get clean and we weren't going to take transfer. So in November of 2022, we closed on that, and we are in the process of demolishing that building. The chief and his guys are going to have some fun storming around.
If you
it.
drive by right now, you'll see an A and a B and a C all written on it. That's the Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta side. That's how we refer to sides when we do it. And we did a 7-hour training on Saturday, which was outstanding. The guys got all kinds of stuff out of it.
So they got to break stuff and smash
Oh, yeah,
stuff
cut
around,
things and
cut
smoke
through
it out.
walls, and
It was
so
fun.
that kind of training is invaluable for our firefighters. But now that building, in shortly, we've got it a bid out. It'll be demoed, and we have formed a building committee that has been appointed and approved by the Board of Selectmen. And this is where I don't want to make eye contact with him because he sends me a text every day. Hey, John, when's a committee meeting? When's a meeting? The committee, we just need to get them convened, and we have actually already put out a bid for the owner's project manager. So as soon as that committee meets, they'll interview project managers and then bring the designer in, and then we're off and running. Now, as far as the ultimate timeline, whether or not, depends on how fast the design is done, how, as a community, how quickly we coalesce around the design and the price. But there is an opportunity potentially to, to bring this forward. I'll say the word nobody wants to hear, but a special town meeting is an option if the project is ready. So it doesn't need to wait to come all the way around to town meeting next year. But again, by the time it's designed, and then this is going to be, without a doubt, the single most expensive project that Northborough's seen. Unlike the school building project, like the Lincoln Street project was a $25 million project, but we got $10.4 million from the state. The library project, we got a grant from the state for that. There is no program at the state level for public safety. Well, at the Mass Municipal Association meeting last weekend, I actually presented at that meeting the resolution on behalf of all the communities in the town, and the resolution included support for a municipal building fund, specifically for public safety, but all municipal buildings, public safety. I think it's insane that we can get a grant for a library project, but you can't get something for a fire station or a police station. The issue with that, like everything, is how are you going to pay for it? So until you can identify a dedicated funding source. I was hopeful that the state would use some of their surplus and ARPA funds to at least, put a program together in the current year, given the escalation, other issues, but the new governor did not take that up. So the legislature is still pushing that. The MMA is still pushing it. But in the meantime, we're moving forward one way or another. But the reason why in the summary that dollar figure is highlighted is because originally we were carrying, a $14 or $15 million construction cost. I don't know where we are at this point. I escalated that cost for 3 years at 7%. And I came up with $18.5 million. We're seeing other stations coming in, that the escalation is going up so fast that bids aren't being held for very long. We're hopeful that things may calm down a little bit, but in the meantime, interest rates are higher now too, so all this stuff is in motion. The big piece of it is we heard from the community around the original conceptual design, and I just want to be clear, the conceptual design that came out of the feasibility study was very little more than, this is the programmatic needs, this is the site, this is how it could fit on the site. Now, whether or not you have columns or louvers or whatever to make it pretty is secondary to, does it fit on the site and is it functional for what we need it to be? But we did hear from folks, we have a downtown revitalization, there's a push to make it, they want it to be an attractive building. We want it to be an attractive building. But, so as we go through the design, development process, I don't know what this thing's going to cost. But I can tell you that the stations out there of a similar size, you're seeing them come in at between $20 and $25 million.
So John, when we get to that, that'll cover what I call the functional requirements. So you have to be able to house people, you have to house the infrastructure, you have to house the equipment, abatement for hazmat and stuff like that. Those requirements we baked into this, yes?
Yes. So it needs to meet it needs to meet the programmatic needs of the department in a sound physical structure. And then from there, anything you do to enhance the aesthetic appeal of it, it's a balance. What does it cost and what do you get for it? The two aren't mutually exclusive. You're not going to design a building that's just a box and it's ugly. But again, we need to be cost conscious because this will go to the voters. It'll go to town meeting, but this will be a debt excluded project, which means it will go to the ballot and people need to support it. And one test is, they want it to be reasonable. I'm very confident that we'll get a functional building that is also aesthetically pleasing. But, when it comes to value engineering, people often say, well, you're cutting quantity or quality. Again, it will be a brick building that will last us 50 years. But depending on how pretty you want it to be, I don't know how else to say this, you could add another $2 or $3 million to the project. So it's a balancing act, but I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, and I'm confident with the right designer, we'll get there.
And just to, what John said, you can add $2 to $3 million. What we can't do is, and we spend a lot of time as a feasibility committee, you can't take away and say, well, do they really need this room?
Yeah.
Do they really need this? Yeah, we did. We spent a lot of time. We looked at how many stations, 6, 7 stations, drove around, went all over the place and stuff. So we didn't put things in that we don't think we need. We put stuff in that we thought we need for the station.
The other piece of it too is, you heard from the police chief earlier, he's got a wooden house. This structure, this new fire station, will be our new emergency command center. And so this thing will be able to house our EOC if we have to activate it, and do so safely. You're not gonna have a heavy wind come through and blow your fire station away. So this building is, again, we're building it for the next 50 years, so.
One last question, Chief. When you bought the tower ladder, the length of that thing, was the size of the existing building a factor in the size of the available
When
equipment?
they purchased the tower?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I have worked for departments where not only was the length critical, but more importantly, the height.
The height.
No, the height.
Yeah.
Because all the old doors in the old fire stations were low, because horses weren't very tall.
Right.
But the new fire trucks are so tall, like that truck cannot go down under the aqueduct.
Right.
That truck and the tanker
Right.
are not allowed to go that way because it won't fit.
Right. Thank you.
Although people seem to think that U-Hauls fit, so I don't know.
So the good news is, there's nothing holding us back from moving forward with design development and community outreach this calendar year with that project. So,
Thank you, John. 2026 is an ambulance replacement. As I mentioned, it's about 68 to 70% of our calls. One of the things that are great about the ambulance replacement is they're totally paid for through our EMS revolving fund. So the fees that we charge for ambulance service goes into an EMS revolving fund. And those fees, that fund is utilized for many different things, for overtime, for training, for equipment, but it's also utilized to purchase our ambulance out of it. So that's two of these, no tax impact on those. $450,000, and I always like to explain to people, say, why so expensive? I said, well, if you've seen our new ambulance, it has a stretcher that comes out, and it's like one guy can operate it, pull it out, and it's on this supported rack, and then push a button and the legs go down, push another button and the legs go. Well, why is that? I said, one back injury,
You're done.
$450,000. It's pretty simple. But that unit itself is about $55,000. Then you put on a LifePak 15, that's another 30 grand. So just those two pieces of equipment add up to a boatload of money, let alone the ambulance itself. So that's where that sits. Questions about the ambulance?
Again, that's 2026.
Yeah, 2027, decided to give you a year off. It's a year after I leave, probably. I don't know what the new chief will do, but we'll see. My intent is to make it through 26, but we'll see. I'm getting old, so we'll see. In 2028 is that truck I mentioned, the squad, to be replaced. That was never part of the CIP before because it was a new truck when I started here, right? So estimating how long that truck's gonna take to replace, do they not
We're all
have?
missing a page there, chief. This- Nope, there's one that's coming before this project right here.
Yeah, it's a squad. If y'all wanna get close and share. I know there's no picture, I apologize. That's because we send the pictures up and they put the pictures on, right? So, Marlboro just went to the same system that we've been using since 16. They just purchased a squad with the same capabilities. That price is based off of the price that they paid for their squad, with a slight escalation because it's out.
Yep.
Again, busy truck. You'll see that truck. So that truck has brush fighting capabilities. It has hazardous material response capabilities.
Oh, thank you so much.
It has EMS response capabilities.
The brush bars in the front.
Yeah, that's small one, yeah. And it's not really good for off-road brush. We have a different truck for that. But that truck spends a lot of time up, for some reason, spends a whole lot of time up at the shop's way putting out mulch fires. We spend more time up there for mulch fires. It's crazy. And that's what it looks like, yeah, that's quite cool.
Pages stuck together.
Busy truck, great concept. I wasn't sure when I came here if I liked that concept, because I was used to running an engine with my ambulances, just because that's what we did, right? And I wasn't sure, and it allowed us to have our main in such a way that I always have someone back at the station for additional calls, so it works out really well. I really like it. Questions about that truck? Okay, so the last one is 2029. You know, it's funny, I was mentioning earlier, I didn't know if I would still be here when this truck came up to go on the CIP, because it was purchased in 2009, and that's the tower. You guys all have that? So that's, a truck that we have is a super specialized truck. It is a truck that is not made in the United States, it's made overseas. It has that articulating boom that you can get into all kinds of funky places. It is a very specialized truck. It's a great truck if I was in a big city and had drivers that did nothing but drive that truck. I had 5 guys on duty. I never know who's gonna drive that truck, right? So they may drive it one week and not drive it for a month and then drive it again. And it's a very complicated piece of equipment to use. To be honest with you, it's down a lot. It's out of service a lot because there's so many safety switches in there. So I'm actually, my guys have been bugging me since I got here. Can you just buy a regular tower with a ladder on it? We'll get there. We'll get there, guys. So that's what you're seeing there. It's a tower, so it's a ladder truck. So you hear me throw the word tower around. What that means is there's a platform on the end. A straight ladder truck has no platform. It's just a straight ladder truck, just like you would use, just think of a regular ladder. You climb up to the end and you go off the end. A tower is the same thing. It's a ladder, but on the end has that bucket that the guys can work out of. Much safer to work out of. All your waterways are pre-piped. You can have 2 people in the bucket with piped in air, hooked in the air, and they can be up there for hours working, as opposed to a straight ladder, which I've worked off of it before, and you get tired standing up there on the rungs, let me tell you. So that 1.9 million is an estimate, and I'm gonna think it's probably, by that time, it's gonna be more. I know people that have bought a straight stick, which is the one without the bucket on the end, within the last year, and they paid 1.3. It is the most expensive piece of apparatus we're going to buy. It's a critical piece of apparatus. Any building fire we have, any chimney fire we have, the one good thing about ours thing right now is it can actually go below grade if need be. We don't utilize it for that, but you have that ability. But any kind of a rescue we have, we can repel off the end, we can use it for It's an incredibly versatile truck, but it is incredibly expensive.
If you recall, this was one of the pieces of equipment that we paid cash for through the mitigation funds when the mall in Avalon Bay went in. So, again, we didn't finance that truck. We were able to find a way to pay cash for it back then.
Chief, where's it made?
The one we have right now,
Germany?
it's one of the Scandinavian.
I would say Sweden.
Sweden. Probably
Yeah,
Sweden.
it's one of the.
Because I remember we had to order a part, and
So-
you said it's like it's gotta come from overseas.
So what happened is when they first got it here, they damaged the bucket on the end. The bucket had to go onto a ship, go back over across the ocean, get fixed, and ship back. There's one guy in the country that I can call if I need help with that truck. And because E1 sells them, and I have to call him. I've actually had paid for him to come in and do some training for my mechanic and my captains, so they can at least troubleshoot the truck. When you get that truck stuck up in the air, and you can't get it back down, and the winds are coming up, that's not a safe situation to be in. So it does what no other truck can do, trust me. I mean, you can drop it over a parapet wall. It's off. You can get places that no other ladder truck will get. We don't have those places. Yeah, Manchester, New Hampshire, and I always refer to because I spend too much time up there. They have 3 of them. But it's a city. And they have the same drivers that are driving the trucks. Questions? Any questions about anything?
No, thank you.
If you guys ever want to come down to the station, take a look around, see what we look like.
Love to.
You are more than welcome.
We know where you live.
Yes, Selectman Wickstead was down there helping out with an assessment center, an Aura board. And she said, can I have a tour? Yeah, we give her a tour. She goes, wow, you guys are really tight in here. I said, yeah, we are. And the building, I don't know who designed that building. It was built in 1974. There's not a straight corner in that building. You go in there and everything's,
Yeah,
Right,
it's sort of a
John?
modern design.
there's so much wasted space. It's crazy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll probably be back next year, so.
I won't.
We'll see. I don't know. It all depends.
Be safe, Chief.
Thank you.
All right. John, you want to talk about our next meeting on
Yes.
February 9th?
Sure. So, again, you're meeting next Thursday on the 9th. We'll have Scott Charpentier coming in. I always try to break him up because he's got a lot of projects to update you on, and that's what he did at your last meeting. So on the 9th, Scott will come in. We'll talk about the DPW capital requests as well as the water and sewer. And then the school department is coming in that evening as well. So you're going to hear about the Proctor School roof and the Z School entrance. So those are the projects. we're talking.
And that's at 6 o'clock, right?
Yes, I asked if that worked for you guys, just because we gotta, trying to help my friends out who spend every night out like me at meetings, try to bring them in a little earlier.
Yeah.
But if that works for you guys, if not, okay, we'll make sure that we let folks know.
Okay. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
I have a question, 2 questions for John.
Yes.
And I guess as the Financial Planning Committee, it's our purview, we can pretty much ask about anything financial. The White Cliffs, it's being proposed that we pay $800,000 from community preservation to give the building away for 52 units?
So the project, well, let me back up. So the town went through a whole request for proposals process. We hired a consultant to help market the project. We received 3 bids. 1 bid did not meet the minimum criteria. Legally, we couldn't consider it. It had to be set aside. Then we had 2 other bids, two groups. One was, the acronym is HAPO, and the other one is a Metro West. The committee went through a process, did interviews, ranked everything, and they came forward with Metro West Collaborative Group. They do affordable housing projects. As part of their proposal, Mike, they're proposing to make their project viable. As part of their pro forma, they're requesting another $800,000 from the town CPC funds as part of a match so that they can then get additional state aid for housing.
And we no longer own the building.
Under any scenario, frankly, the town would have more than likely given the building for some nominal fee.
So we're paying $800,000 to walk away from the building.
Well, not when you, not exactly. So let's back up. The town originally financed the acquisition of the building and the stabilization of the building. So we put a roof on, we did other things to stabilize the building envelope. The point of that was to preserve the building, to then buy us some time to find a user. In an ideal world, somebody would come in and say, listen, if you give it to us or lease it long-term, 99 years for $1, or give it to us, then basically what we're doing is we're buying down the cost of somebody coming in to make that project feasible. The project isn't feasible. For someone to come in, that's why the original seller, they were going to tear the building down. If you want to preserve the building, essentially, if you think about our initial investment is to preserve the building, but then, you know, ideally, somebody would come in, they wouldn't ask for any more money from the town, and we'd give it to them for $1, and then they would fix it up and put it back in use. Through that proposal, through that process, the one viable proposal that we received was from this group, the Metro West Collaborative. They're a very reputable group. They've got a real track record. They have a real team. They have real financing, and they can do the project. Now, the question is, so when the committee went through and they ranked them, that project was the one that ranked the highest and is potentially viable. That doesn't mean we're going to do it. Now, it needs to go to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen now need to determine whether or not that is the project that they want to do. The town has the right to, at any point, reject any and all proposals. The folks that are making the proposal at this point, it's going to be a negotiation about finances and a negotiation about historic preservation restrictions and a negotiation about access from the community. All that wraps into a purchase and sale. So whether or not this is something the board wants to do remains to be determined.
It just seems to me, and I don't know, and I know you can't comment on this, that, again, I've been very vocal against the purchase of that building. It's not like we found money on the street. Now we're gonna give almost $1 million, give the building away, to put in 52 affordable units, 100% of them affordable, with an estimated 26 students. I did my homework, I've read all the proposals. 26 students coming in, causing traffic. Have we looked at what it would cost to not do it, to make it open space? It just seems that, again, we were backed into a corner, and I did see the proposal, and it looks like a very reputable group. I'm saying nothing against the group. Yeah. It's just, again, as the finance committee, we do have the right to look at some other things, and when I saw that we're gonna pay $800,000 to keep a facade of the building and put in a lot of units.
That's what they're asking. That's what they're asking
That's-
for,
so
whether
you
or not.
clarified what they're, yeah.
That's what they're asking for. Whether or not that, you know, is what happens at the end of the discussion remains to be seen. Again, just to back up, when we purchased that building, you know, look, I've done a lot of capital projects. You know, as we said, I make the buffalo do his big business by squeezing that nickel so hard, right? So I was very clear at town meeting that we didn't have a plan for this building. We didn't know how much it was going to cost. We didn't know how it was going to end. But by virtue of the town's right of first refusal, you either buy it and try to figure it out after the fact, which is the exact opposite of any other project I've ever done in my municipal career, or you let it go and it gets demolished. But once it's demolished, you've lost that piece of fabric of the community. So we did what we did. Keep in mind, if the town wanted to sell the place, if we can't find a way to preserve it and we sold it, we're not going to lose money on it. The land and everything is worth more than what we paid for it at this stage. But the end game here all along has been to preserve the building and to preserve that streetscape at a minimum and some of the really key historic features that are on the inside. So, you know, this is not a perfect process, and I'll just say this again, as I said at town meeting, you didn't buy this building because it made good economic sense. You bought the building to preserve the historic fabric of the community, and you're going to pay a premium for that. So in a perfect scenario, we would buy down the cost of that project by the investment we made already, and ideally someone could come in and make it work. So we subsidize the acquisition costs. through this proposal, again, this is, you go through the public bid process. You know, we didn't get anybody that wanted to come in and open it up as a hotel venue, or as an event space, or, you know, we went through and cast the broadest net that we could. And those were the proposals that came forward. So now you just, with the town, the community's gonna need to decide if that's what we wanna do. So, the only other, you have two other options. If that proposal isn't one that the town decides they want to move forward with, you have two options. You can spend municipal dollars to renovate that building and put it to some kind of municipal use. It will be at least probably close to around $10 million. Or you can put it back out on the street with another RFP and further define what you want or don't want, and see if somebody else will come forward. But much like putting your house on the market, usually the first offer you get is the best. When you take it off and put it back on again, you know, we hired a consultant who connected with over 60 people who might have been interested in this potential project. And out of that, we got 3 proposals, 2 of which met the minimum criteria. They were real proposals, one of which can actually do something with that building. So that's where we are. And again, there's a lot more discussions to be had, more negotiations to be conducted, but ultimately, it's gonna be the Board of Selectmen that decides whether or not they want to accept that proposal or not. But if you don't accept it, you can't just say, well, we don't like this proposal, but we're just gonna sit on the building. Well, I guess you could, but then you're gonna have to have the carrying costs. Remember, there's the additions in the back, the original, the architect that did the feasibility study a couple of years ago very strongly recommended that the additions in the back be removed because they're not structurally sound and they're leaking water into the building. Inside, as a stopgap measure, we've tried to partition off and seal off those additions from the historic part of the building, and we're running dehumidifiers in the historic part of the building. That's not a really good solution. And the moment we get to the summer months and the humidity's high, those humidifiers aren't gonna be able to keep that place dehumidified. It's just not. And so, so you need to remove those additions, and you're gonna need to make some significant investments into the building. As far as trying to, you know, get it up to code to where it could be used again, I mean, the code compliance, it's millions. Just the fire suppression code compliance, to bring it up to code to open it again, is over $500,000. You know, elevators, electrical, you know, it's an old building that needs a lot of work. It looks pretty, and it looks nice on the inside, and it's in really good shape in terms of the bones of the structure. But all the systems, you know, the plumbing, the electrical, the heating, those are very, very expensive systems. They're all done. They're all done. They need to be completely replaced. And trying to do things like fire suppression in a historic building without destroying it means it's twice as expensive. So more to come on that. You know, even if they went with this proposal, the town would still be carrying the building for probably another 2 years until everything gets lined up. Community Preservation Committee isn't proposing to bring forward an article for $800,000 at this town meeting, so that's not gonna happen, you know. So there's a lot of things that need to be discussed and take place, so. But yes, Mike, it's gonna cost money. No matter what, it's going to cost the town money. We purchased the historic preservation. That's what we did. So, and we hope that it will pan out for the town. Again, if it doesn't, and I'm not saying that this will be, but if it doesn't, the town isn't gonna ultimately lose money, because that parcel minus the building was worth what we paid for it. So we're trying to save the building. I hope that answers the question. That's a lot of information. I'd encourage anybody who wants to know more on the website, and I've sent you guys all the information as it comes through, so you're in the loop as in real time. But the proposals and the RFP and the evaluations, all that stuff is on the White Cliffs Committee page on the town's webpage. So I encourage people to look at that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Hearing none? No. We are dismissed.